and we can mute you if you don't know how to do that. So no worries. Just FYI. And also, I just wanted to let you all know that we are going to record this so that we can share it with people afterwards through our website. Blair's agreed to allow us to record it. And, I think Blair's expecting this to be an informal presentation. So she welcomes your questions throughout. Just remember to unmute yourself. If you'd rather, feel free to just put a question in the chat, or you can save your questions at the end. I know Blair expects there will be plenty of time. So on that note, I'll turn it over to you, Blair.
Well, thank you all so much for being here on what feels like a lot earlier than 9:45 today. I'm really grateful for the invitation and very grateful for Potomac's support of the YAV program through the years, and we'll touch on that even more in the presentation. So that 11-month-old angel is upstairs, and you might hear him or his toys from time to time. He may even pop in. I'm not sure what the schedule will be, but I am going to go into screen share. I have a presentation prepared, but please do ask questions at any time. We're a small group, so this can absolutely be a conversation. All right. Okay, so as Julie said, I am the site coordinator of the DC Young Adult Volunteer Program. I've been site coordinator for about 1.5 years, which means that it has been just a strange time to be coming into this job. I'm happy to tell you about my experience as site coordinator, as former YAV. I also served on the YAV board previous to becoming site coordinator here in DC. And so can answer questions from experiences on all of those different sides. So I know y'all have heard about the YAV program from YAVs who have come to visit Potomac. So some of this might be repeat and some of this might be fresh information as well. And Potomac has also had such a connection to the program. Emily Powers was on our board. She's a DC YAV alum, and I know she is a beloved member of your community, as well as Carol Hudgings served on our board when I was on the board, so we got to serve together. So there's a lot of Potomac connections, as well as the financial support that you guys have given us through the years, which is so appreciated. We are a volunteer program. We have relatively few sources of funding, so funding from congregations is one of our primary revenue streams and is very appreciated. All right, I'm going to go to our next slide. I have to pick where everybody's faces go so that I can advance the slides as well as see the chat, and it's always a juggle. But I would like to start us with a short video, just an introduction to the YAV program if anybody has not heard about it before, and just a reminder of the program for those of you who are familiar. So this is just a 2-minute video here. And if you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear it, I appreciate that.
This program is a great option for anyone between the ages of 19 and 30 that wants to learn more about who they are, who God is, and what it means to serve God in this world.
I found so much strength that I didn't know I had during my YAV year.
My time here has been the most amazing time of my life. I've been challenged a lot, and that can be difficult, but also I can see the growth that I'm going through, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And I wanted to do something where I could actively be involved and actively be working for something else besides myself. And I feel like once you're doing that, your purpose will come to you.
You can see God working in your life, and also you can see God through these people.
Jump right in. Don't be afraid to be a part of a new experience. The slogan is a lifetime of change, and it's true. It transforms your perspective of the world.
Es una bonita experiencia Y entonces, poco a poco es eso, ¿no? Claro, sí, es como mis hijos, ¿no? Mis hijas, sí. Entonces yo creo que es bueno eso, ¿no?
And it's not a place of you have to be in this stage of your life for the YAV program to be beneficial and an amazing step for you to do, but it can meet you where you are, and it can take you somewhere you never thought you would be able to go.
All right, so you heard there that the YAV slogan is a year of service for a lifetime of change. We really believe that. We have seen the way that one YAV year can set the path for a lifetime of service. In particular, a lot of YAVs serve the church, a lot of YAVs serve nonprofits, go into fields of making a difference in the world. We really see that a lot with our alums, and they stay connected to the YAV program. It really draws us in and keeps us close, as you can see from my life example. The YAV program is an ecumenical program. We welcome volunteers from all Christian faiths. We do put the Christian forward in our program. It's still Christian discernment. We have a lot of spiritual formation as part of our program, but it's not limited to Presbyterian young adults. Each volunteer receives a stipend, just to tell you some more of the details of the program. And it's very simple living. We'll get into the core tenets in just a little bit, and simple living is one of our tenets. So enough to make it, enough to make it in DC, but that dollar really has to stretch, and volunteering is really at the heart of the program. So it's a little different from like an AmeriCorps year because of that emphasis on spiritual formation, on discernment in a Christian context. And all of our sites really have a focus as well on equity, on justice. So we also have an emphasis on communal connection. We really want young adults to become a part of the place that they're serving. It's not, I am taking a year out of my life to do this thing in a exotic locale that has nothing to do with the rest of my life. We're really asking YAVs to be immersed in their community, become community partners, to feel that DC is their community, their world. And as a site coordinator, I can explain a little bit about what my role is. So I lead programming for the volunteers. I am the liaison between the work placements that they have Monday through Thursday, and I'll tell you a little bit about that schedule. I help them with that spiritual discernment, with the formation, and generally, keep the YAV year running, as well as I do that with the board. As you've had a couple board members, you might be familiar with the role of the board. They support both the young adult volunteers as well as myself, support in fundraising, support in logistics for the program, and really get to know the YAVs and help them connect to a broader community while they're here in DC. And I am going to go to the next slide here. So just a word about the pictures you'll see. These are from our 2019-2020 DC YAVs, the last group that we had here. We haven't had YAVs this past year due to COVID. So you'll see their adventures around DC. Retreats you'll see on the left side of your screen are a big part of the YAV program to continue that discernment and formation and bonding between the group. Communal living is one of our values, and so we try to break down the walls that can come with living with strangers and help them become a community within the house as well as within the city. So you'll see pictures of their site placements as well as some of the activities they do together, and I'll be describing those along the way as well. And just to let you know where YAVs serve outside of DC, we do have national and international sites, as we were saying earlier. Our national sites include Albuquerque, Tucson Borderlands, Chinook, Montana, New Orleans, as you saw in the video, New York, Asheville, North Carolina. Those are our current domestic sites. And internationally is a little bit of a different story because of COVID. Realities of getting a program online for the next year are a little different for some of our international partners, but we will have programs in Scotland, South Korea, and Colombia for sure. You saw Peru, that's one of our site placements. And we also have a placement in the Philippines. But again, some of those are a little more up in the air for the next year, as is so much in our lives right now, right? I'm sure y'all can relate. But those are the different site placements. And they shift. So Kenya was a placement in 2007, 2008 when I served. It is not now. It may be in the future. Zambia has been a placement. Boston has been a placement. So some sites kind of rotate on and off, just given, can partners host YAVs in the work placements and just the different realities of different contexts. They're always shifting, as we well know. So here are the core tenets of the Young Adult Volunteer Program. This is kind of what roots us and what all sites share in common. So intentional Christian community. I mentioned this a little bit before. In DC, young adults live together in a shared house or apartment, depending on how many YAVs we have. And so it's really important for us to build those bonds of community among the YAVs. They're really learning how to compromise, how to communicate, how to live through conflict, how to really just be there for one another, literally, physically, and emotionally as supports, and learn what they need out of relationships, as well as what they need to give. But we also have a real emphasis on that intentional Christian community being broader than the house. So being the neighborhood that they live in. And for the last few years, YAVs have lived in kind of the 8th Street Northeast corridor, right near the Hechinger Mall. And that's just such a great community. It's folks who have lived there a long time. It's also young folks like the YAVs. So that's they lived right next door to the library and community center. So just a real way to get to know their neighbors, say good morning, just those things that really root people in a community and make them invested in it. That's huge for our program. And also reflecting together as a community is a big part of the program. That happens once a week. We have time with the site coordinator and the YAVs to do Bible study, to do the vocational discernment piece. Where is God calling me in my life? And how would I know that if God was calling me? And as well as spiritual formation, as well as processing what they're seeing day to day. I'll tell you more about the work that YAVs do, but it's very challenging. And it's very helpful to have that community to reflect and process with. And building those relationships kind of is a different muscle. We're finding generationally, it's a little bit of a different shift to have those in-person relationships be so valuable. What we found over the last few years is as young adults community moves more virtually and they connect with their friends more online, having that expectation that they know their neighbors, literally know their neighbors, is a little countercultural. It becomes a bigger ask, and it's still a value of ours. And we're navigating, like, what does that mean for folks graduating from college right now who have done so much online? And even after this year is going to be a bigger question. How do we build up again that muscle to have relationships in person? And we're going to have to be doing a lot of support around that in the year to come. And I'll talk more about what I think might be happening in the year to come and some of our goals and challenges for that. Simple living, I mentioned that before, is a core tenet. So that's not only living on a very strict stipend, that's also an environmental sustainable impact. How do my choices affect my community? What does it mean if I decide I want to travel the entire East Coast while I'm a YAV and I leave DC every other weekend? Is that a choice how does that affect my community? Is that simple living? So just making decisions through another lens, which is more communal, is part of simple living as well. Now, I want to lift up something here that is something the YAV program is wrestling with. So we talk simple living because the program historically has this assumption that most of the YAVs who come to the program can afford to take a year off of making money, or that they will have financial support if they need it. So one thing we're doing is really questioning those examples, or those assumptions. Where do they come from? They come from a history of being rooted in white supremacist structures of wealth that has been handed down generation to generation, And we're really questioning who has access to that wealth, who doesn't, and are we a program that's open to everybody when we have such assumptions that people can live simply for a year. So I just want to bring that up, that these are really questions we're wrestling with and we want to take seriously. For example, the YAV program has had a history of asking every YAV to fundraise thousands of dollars. And some of our YAVs do it like that, when they ask their church once and their church can give them thousands of dollars. But that is not the reality for everybody in the program. And it's definitely not the reality of everybody we want to be in the program, but is that a barrier? Cross-cultural mission. See, also a little bit rooted in those white supremacist assumptions that coming to DC would be very different culturally for all YAVs and bring them outside of their comfort zone. So that's not the case for all YAVs, but getting outside of your comfort zone is the case for all YAVs. At some point during the year, it's going to happen. So we ask YAVs to take risks, to push themselves in new ways. For example, the longest night of the year, December 21st each year, the YAVs hold vigil in DC with community partners and remember lives lost of people experiencing homelessness, people who died on the street. And some YAVs stay the vigil the entire night, some YAVs don't, but we ask them to try to push themselves into discomfort, into something new. And what comes out of that? What comes out of taking a chance, making a new relationship, talking to somebody that you don't know, that is from a very different background than yourself. So we do always ask YAVs to push themselves and then to confront systemic challenges. And that's also an area of discomfort. So question assumptions, question privilege, question systems. And we do that through our reflective work and also through the day-to-day work that YAVs do at their work placements. Vocational discernment. So a lot of YAVs are coming to us straight out of college or, as you know, 19 to 30 in their 20s. And so this is a time to really reflect on where am I going? What is God calling me to do next? And we do that through the work that YAVs are doing. It's not necessarily a mysterious process. I think people come into the YAV program saying, okay, I'm going to leave knowing exactly what God is calling me to do because something mysterious is going to happen through vocational discernment. I'm going to hear that call. I'm going to light a candle and God is going to tell me. And what we try to do is kind of demystify vocational discernment and say, well, what is bringing you life in the work that you are doing? What can you say? I never want to do this again. I don't think this is where God is calling me. Where were you stretched and felt, oh, maybe this is a skill I didn't even know I had? So that's kind of the vocational discernment process. We use a number of techniques like Ignatian spiritual practices that help really focus on those questions of where was God in my day-to-day? Where did I feel the most energy, joy? Where did I feel the opposite of that? And what can that tell me about maybe my future vocational path or just the next step? And finally, leadership development through faith and action. That is exactly what it sounds like. It's doing the work and developing new skills, developing leadership skills, building, for some people, this is their first employment experience, full-time employment experience. So really building those skills with partners who want to foster that. The supervision of the placement opportunities is a huge part of their day-to-day experience. So supervisors are really building those skills within the YAVs, calling them out, and helping them develop as future leaders in the church and in the world. And I actually managed to share my screen so widely that I totally cannot see the chat. So if there have been any questions, please stop me at any point. All right. So this is the YAV DC new mission statement that we developed a few months ago. Following the heart of God, we engage and resist the power structures that uphold inequity. So you've heard me talk a little bit about that already, but this is work that YAVs do in their day-to-day placements as well as in their reflection. Also, YAVs in DC have a long history of speaking out, of going to protests, of engaging on their time off. I'll talk a little bit about some other ways they do that. But this is also now the lens that we're using to make sure all of our site placements that the YAVs work at matches up, is fighting inequity, This is really, just the lens through which we want to be doing all of our work. And we believe that this is God's work. We believe that we are following the heart of God when we are tackling inequitable structures. So I've talked a lot about the site placements, the work placements. Where do DC YAVs do their work? So you probably have heard this when YAV spoke to you, a couple of the placements that they shared with you. But Office of Public Witness, the PCUSA Office of Public Witness, has been a longtime partner of ours. You see the picture of folks outside on the Hill, right, because Office of Public Witness, as you know, is right there across from the Capitol. So that is congressional advocacy based on the General Assembly's statements of the PCUSA. So anything that the church has a written statement on that's been passed by the General Assembly, the Office of Public Witness can act on. So it's a lot of economic justice. This past year, 1920, our YAV worked a lot on inequities caused by race that led to economic injustices, the racial wealth gap. That was a huge focus of the Office of Public Witness and Langley, our YAV's work there. And sometimes YAVs have focused internationally and sometimes on domestic issues while at the Office of Public Witness. YAVs get placed at churches often. We've worked at many churches in DC, Capitol Hill Presbyterian, Northminster, New York Avenue, Next Church. You'll see on there, YAVs have worked at the Pilgrimage, at Church of the Pilgrims. So a lot of different partner congregations in the city, often working on justice issues, also often working with youth and children. Homeless services has been a real hallmark of our program as well. A few years ago, there was a desire for the program to have at least an element of direct service, face-to-face interaction with people experiencing oppression in DC, whether that was homelessness or another type of concern. But homelessness is a direction that we really lived into. So we had several partners working with people experiencing homelessness, whether that was a day center, helping people meet their needs, getting laundry done, showers, getting people connected to housing resources. That's been a big part of our program. And that's actually, I used to work in homeless services in Montgomery County, and we had a YAV placed at Interfaith Works for a little bit as well. So we've had a lot of different partner organizations in that field, as well as Martha's Table in conjunction with Western Presbyterian Church, Everyone Home DC. And we've also had YAVs engaged in anti-racism work. So we had YAV for 2 different years at Service Never Sleeps. This is an organization that brings allyship and anti-racism training to organizations. They're actually working with National Capital Presbytery to train pastors and maybe ruling elders. This month, they're kicking off a series of trainings. So then also we were able to bring that allyship training back to the YAVs who were not working at that placement. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. That was a really wonderful program. And I've also listed the Steinbrook Center here. That's very similar to the Pilgrimage at Church of the Pilgrims, if you're familiar. That is a site where groups, usually of youth, come to DC and maybe they're doing service projects, but then they're also learning, why do such inequities exist? Why is homelessness an issue in DC? What are the policies that led to that? Who is affected? And they just take a deeper look as opposed to just going to a soup kitchen and not asking why that exists and why that is a need. So communal life, I've talked about how intentional Christian community is a value and a tenet of the program. So the YAVs live together in community, as I mentioned. Here you can see them doing that in lots of different formats. In the house that was at the H Street corridor, on the streetcar on H Street, walking down Yale Street, Northeast. This is both the favorite part of YAVs and as well as the most challenging part of the YAV year for some folks. I mean, it is hard to be community when you are working so hard at your placement, maybe working on homeless services issues, which can be really challenging. You kind of wonder, am I chipping away at such a huge issue? What am I, how is my work really making an impact? And then you come home and someone who was supposed to empty the dishwasher didn't, it just can really build on itself and be a challenge, but it is real life, right? We are helping YAVs learn how to navigate those relationships and to do it because they care about one another. and because they want to learn how to let people care for them. They are really big skills that not all of us know at 22, right? Coming out of college or coming out of different experiences at that age. So that's a real growing edge, but it's also where YAVs find a lot of joy, as you can see. So they make a covenant at the beginning of the year to one another. That's about how they want to live together. Some of it's, excuse me. Some of it's very routine, like who's gonna go grocery shopping when, and then some of it is, this is how I need you to approach me in a conflict. This is how long I want us to be a house before we invite guests to stay the weekend. This is what matters to me, and it really comes down to values as well. So that's a really important process that all sites share in common, especially where YAVs are living together, because YAVs do not live together at every site. As you saw in the video, some YAVs live in host families as well. So it also comes down to communal budgeting. We talked about that stipend. YAVs in DC pay their own utilities, and each YAV usually pays a different utility, but they don't all cost the same, right? So making sure that each person's costs are equitable. No one's paying a lot more than any other YAV for internet versus gas. And, you know, for some people, it's the first time they've ever had to navigate such conversations, right? And then, as I mentioned before, community outside the house, we really, really care about and find to be a new conversation each year. Sorry, I'm talking too much. All right, unique features of the DC YAV site. All DC YAVs get trained in community organizing. So they get this training through the Industrial Areas Foundation, which has branches in DC, Northern Virginia, in Maryland. They have local branches that then the YAVs can connect to. Now we believe, I am so sorry. Does someone have a question? I just need a sip of water.
You said they do a covenant at the first of the year. Is this program, it's a one-year program, I believe you said, but is it a calendar year?
Great question. I should have explained that. So it's usually an academic year. So YAVs start end of August and go through end of July. So it's an 11-month program. So the covenant that they do at the beginning of the year and then continue to revisit because things change, people change, goals change, values change. So I also have made a habit of just every once in a while asking YAVs to reread their covenant to one another. It can help kind of set the scene for different conversations, especially as conflict arises, which is absolutely going to happen and should happen. We need to learn to live through that. So yeah, they are here from end of August to end of July. This year, we will see, I'll talk a little bit about the unknowns of this year, but we're going to try to stick pretty close to that. So the community organizing, thank you for that question and for giving me a second break.
Blair, I had heard that the pilgrimage closed. Is that right? So...
That's right. Yeah, we so our sites really rotate in and out. Yeah, so the pilgrimage closed. Before that they had not been a site for a couple of years. But the Steinbrook Center is very similar to the pilgrimage, and we had a YAV there in 1920. But yeah, so that brings up something I'll talk about in a little bit, but I'll mention now. The ground for our placement partners is really shifting right now.
Yeah.
Will Steinbrook Center be a site this year? We're not sure. Will they be accepting groups? We're not sure. So we do have a lot of unknowns, and we really care about the relationship with the partner so that if they can't be a site for a couple of years, maybe then they can be again. So things do rotate through.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so anybody else have a question while we're at this time?
Well, I was just going to interject since Ed asked about the program year. If I remember correctly, the application process is going on now for people for the coming August?
Yep, exactly. Yes, so we are starting the interview process. I'll talk even more about that in a little, well, I'll talk about it now. We are starting the interview process. So it's a little bit of a rolling interview that applications can start in January and roll through June. June 1st is our cutoff. And at this time, YAVs are interested in lots of different sites. They talk to staff in Louisville first from the YAV program, and then they talk to individual sites. So they'll talk to myself as well as a board member, and we can give them a sense of what the DC site is like. We can ask them questions that help us understand their fitness. Would DC be a good site, or might they do better in New York? And then all of the site coordinators from the different sites come together and have a conversation. So we can share information that we heard that maybe somebody else didn't hear in their interview that will help us place the YAV in the site that we think will fit with them the best. And sometimes that fit is to say, I think they'll be really challenged by Tucson Borderlands, and I think that's a great thing. And let's encourage that. So it's a back and forth in that way. And that is giving us hope in life right now. After a year of no YAVs, it's really great to start those conversations. We've had 2 interviews already. We have 2 lined up for the next week. And we will probably have 4 YAVs this year. We've ranged from 3 to 6. We want to make sure in this upcoming year that we can address the new challenges that a year of COVID have placed on the YAVs' lives, emotionally, spiritually. We want to make sure we have enough placements because our placement partners have had to be so flexible and change their budgets. So that will probably be a little smaller house than last year.
Was Emily Powers a former YAV?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
In New York, right? Was she in New York?
She was in DC. Did she do 2 years?
I think she did for her first year was New York, maybe, and then came here.
That's right. Yeah, Emily was a YAV, and then she served on our board. It was so great to have her perspective as recent YAV. That's a perspective we really value on the board, because we might say, maybe the YAVs come to us with a question about that communal budgeting process and say, one of our YAVs is paying a lot more on the metro than the rest of us because we can walk to our sites. What are you going to do about that, YAV board? And that's been a really helpful position for a recent YAV to say, we handled it this way, or you really need to pay attention when a YAV says something like this. They often really are strong advocates for the current YAVs. So she was a really wonderful board member to work with. And I was on the board while she was on the board too. So I loved working with her and get to stay in touch with her, which is great. Any other questions? I appreciate what you're asking. Okay, well then, you've covered a lot of what I'm going to share. So the presentation is a lot closer to complete, so we will have more time to chat.
I have a question for you.
Please.
You talk about the mutual discernment process that determines where a YAV goes.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I heard you also say that you get together with your board and you make the final decision. This would be good for Mr. X or Mrs. Y or Miss Y. Tell me a little bit more about the mutual discernment process. Is it student oriented? Is it YAV oriented? Or is it leadership oriented?
That is a question we are always asking ourselves. Like, is it really mutual? So it is mutual in that the YAVs choose which sites they're most interested in, and they interview with those sites. Then the YAVs also rank each interview that they've had in terms of which one they felt most called to. So usually the conversation around, I think this could really be a challenge, is when they've picked 2 sites as number 1. And we have to decide, well, where are they going to go? So that the offer does come from all the site coordinators together in Louisville.
So you offer to the YAV student. They don't.
Yeah, we offer to the YAV.
I want to go to New York. I really feel called to go to New York. And your organization could say, no, Bismarck, South Dakota.
So it would be very, very rare for that to happen. So a YAV will say, if New York is all that they want, they're saying, this is my number one, I feel really, really called there.
Right.
I don't know. So again, I have a limited experience in this process, having only gone through it once previously. I do not know of any situation where, yeah, so this is my number one, and they didn't want to go anywhere else and they were placed somewhere else. I don't think that happens. It's usually when there has to be a tie broken. If two sites say, we both really, really want this YAV, and the YAV really wants both of those sites. So, and sometimes there's a situation where a YAV picks a site as number one, and that site says, we actually can't support this goal that they have. So we are in conversation with them, and the YAVs do have an opportunity to say, that's not where I want to go, if they get an offer from somewhere they don't want to go. So it is an ongoing conversation. But you're right, that is an area that we continually work on and try to find that balance.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I appreciate it.
What percent of applicants are accepted into the YAV program?
What percent, is that what you asked?
Yes.
That is interesting. The way the process goes, I am not actually sure, because Louisville makes the first call. So our colleagues in Louisville who run the entire YAV program speak with the YAVs first, and they have a couple different conversations with them. And we just changed our process such that Louisville makes the determination if someone is going to continue in the YAV program, if they're going to be accepted into the program as a whole, and then the sites interview them. So I don't know how many people do not make it past that first round. But that's a good question. I will ask. Yeah, because we just shifted things, so that's now unknown. And one thing I appreciate about the program is that we're constantly asking these questions and making shifts. We do that sometimes when people give us feedback, and sometimes just when we take a look at our processes and say, is this really fair for the YAV? Is this really fair for, are we doing this equitably? Are we creating barriers that we do not need to be creating? Who is excluded when we do our processes this way? So that's something I really value about the program, is we're constantly asking those questions. And we've gotten a lot of time to do that in the past year, right? When we haven't had YAVs. So we've been doing a lot of reflection.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Claire, is the house in DC where the YAVs lived previously, is that owned by the presbytery, or is it just a place that's rented?
Rented.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's a place that's rented. So we recently ended the lease at the place that we had previously, and it was such a back and forth. So we still had the house when we didn't have YAVs.
I see.
And we were thinking about, how do we terminate this lease without having to pay the rest of the lease, because that was on the table. That was the expectation of the owner. And we tried to get subletters in, we tried a lot of different things, and ultimately we got to the place where the landlord would let us out without making us pay the balance of the lease.
Okay.
So we now are houseless. And that is actually some helpful flexibility, because we'll see, we might be able to have a place that's a little more economically feasible for us if we only have 4 YAVs, maybe an apartment as opposed to a house.
Right.
We love that neighborhood, and we're thinking about staying near there. We're still in conversations with the realtor who hooked us up with that house, and he said that it's very possible we could stay in that neighborhood. There are units that we would fit in that are in that neighborhood.
Blair, just a curiosity question. Do the young people, the YAVs, when they're set and in their community and making community and communal decisions, do they do any overt Bible study ever?
Yes. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that part?
Absolutely. So once a week, I gather with the YAVs for spiritual formation time. That was on Sunday nights historically. Who knows if that will be the case moving forward, but we meet for we do Bible study. Sometimes it's lectionary based. Sometimes it's stories of discernment, since that's such a huge part of our program, calls of leaders, people figuring out their path forward in the Bible. Yeah, you can bet Moses comes up a lot, the prophets, also a lot of justice work from the Bible. I'm not letting YAVs get through a year without the story of the persistent widow. That's my personal theology. In Luke 19. So yeah, we do that weekly. And sometimes it's reflection on written word that's not the Bible, but through a spiritual lens. So sometimes it's devotionals. We have a YAV board member, Shawnee McElwain, who's written several devotionals. We've used her materials. We've used Howard Thurman. We've used lots of different theologians. So that's the time that's very explicitly spiritual formation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sometimes YAVs also have devotional time together that they set up weekly time for, and the YAVs rotate ownership of that time and leadership of that time. That happens. And also our retreat time, at least twice a year, we go on retreats. The picture that you saw previously when they were in the woods was at Camp Hanover outside Richmond. We stayed there and also got to tour Union Seminary. And that was our November 2019 retreat. So that's a lot of time for spiritual formation as well. All right, let me get through this point, because I think we covered most of the points on the other slides, although we can continue with conversation. I'll just get through some of our extracurriculars that we have in DC. So organizing, like I said, they get trained at the beginning, towards the beginning of the year, in community organizing principles. So what are those? Those are helping YAVs build power within community, build those skills to make real systemic, sustainable change that comes from the community, that is not top down, it's relational power. So they learn all about those principles. Some explicitly carry it out in community organizing framework, Washington Interfaith Network, WIN, or they just see those principles come up in their sites. Community organizing believes that we work for the world as it should be, even though we live in the world as it is. So what are they doing each day to create the world as it should be, or as we might say, the kingdom of God on earth, right? So some people, that's absolutely their cup of tea and they run with it. Some people, it just pops up in their day-to-day. Allyship, I mentioned Service Never Sleeps previously, and the YAVs do monthly allyship conversations on those Sunday nights, led by the YAVs. So we have talked about economic inequities, reparations, how to just words, phrases that allies use, just practicing those. So that it has been real tangible work that's come from one of our site placements. We are very well connected to the Presbytery. The Presbytery has been a huge support for the DC YAV program for forever. That is not exclusive to DC, but our relationship with the Presbytery has been a hallmark of the program. They really invite the YAVs to present at Presbytery. They make sure YAVs are coming to different churches like Potomac to share their story. They've just been they also financially support us. Technically, I'm a staff member of the Presbytery, so they've just offered us a lot of structural support. And the community days, I mentioned before, YAVs work 4 days a week. On a 5th day, we do community days where we're out in DC. The picture on the bottom right is the YAVs at the Frederick Douglass House. That's a community day that we carry forward each year. They went to the Museum of African American History and Culture. That's the top photo. And it's not just museums and sites. It's also meeting activists in DC who work on housing. It's they went to Wesley Seminary to learn about liturgy and dance and music in worship. They this is a place where community members get to come and share their expertise with YAVs and just invite them into a corner of DC that they might not have seen otherwise. So that's a really lovely feature of the program. A lot of sites have that, but I just wanted to lift up the ways that we live into that in DC. So I've talked a lot about this already. I don't really need to go point by point in this, but just to say that as a partner, as a part of PCUSA World Mission, some decisions are made by Louisville, some decisions are made by us as a site, and World Mission decided we were not going to have a YAV program this last year. DC had already realized that was going to be the way forward for us, so we had also decided that, and therefore it was a mutual decision. So that partnership offers us lots of support, lots of connection to the broader church. And if World Mission says no one can travel internationally, which is what they said the last year, then that really can limit the scope of our program. Now, it is possible, and Louisville has given us the green light to go ahead as DC YAV without Louisville support, if that's the way that things, if World Mission says no travel in the future. If everybody's vaccinated by May 31st, how much of this do we need to think about? But that still leaves us with a lot of questions. DC is committed to moving forward as a program in the next year, and it is our hope that we can do that with all of our siblings across the world in World Mission. As I mentioned before, sites in the second point, we're not able to host YAVs this past year, and that leaves us with a lot of questions for this year, which I've been talking about. And let's end on a word of hope. As y'all asked about, interviews are underway. That gives us a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of hope as a site coordinator. We're talking to new placement partners. The Presbytery has offered a placement working in anti-racism work, connecting congregations who are doing that work and resourcing them. Our board has been under transition this year. We just got 2 new members this last week. That's giving us a lot of hope and energy in a year that has been low energy. It's been hard to be a program without YAVs. It's broken our hearts. And I feel like we're picking up the pieces and really moving forward with a lot of hope. And we'll be in a new location. So, ways Potomac can continue supporting DCF. First of all, a huge thank you for all the ways you have been supporting us financially, with your prayers, with awesome board members, inviting YAVs to share their stories. These are all amazing ways that you can continue to support us. When I go out of screen share, I will copy and paste the link. There's also ways to give individually through the Presbytery website. We are other on the donation page, so just put DC YAV in the other blank, and that will get to us. We have had great experience with Potomac members on the board. If you are interested, please talk to me. Also put my email in the chat. We are always looking for more board members. When Carol and Emily were on the board, we were at 12 board members, and we are not there, even though we got our 2 new ones. So we are continuing to build. And if this pulls on your heart and you want to support, that is absolutely a way to do so. And I've mentioned some of the spiritual formation times, the community times. A lot of those come from relationships in the community where someone has an area of expertise that really fits with what we're doing as a YAV program. And we invite people to come to Sunday nights, the formation portions. We have speakers there. We have people on our community days who share their worlds with us and how that affects the DC community. We always invite that. So if that's something, if you have something you really want to share with the YAVs, please let me know. And we love for you to continue in the relationship the way that you have been, with your prayers and with the invitation for YAVs to come to Potomac. They are, they are very dynamic, and I think you'll get even more out of it than you got out of this conversation. So we encourage you to continue inviting them, and they get so much out of it. They love seeing worship in different contexts. That's one of the joys of the YAV program, is they get to try out new communities all the time. So I will stop sharing. Thank you for the questions you've already brought up, and I am happy to answer more.
Okay. I was just curious to know about, post-YAV here. Do you have like a way to help the YAV members to remain engaged? I know that's difficult often because you have your year and then you move on, but are there any programs or reunions or any ways to continue the service perhaps?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, so YAV, broader YAV has a very, very active alumni network. So YAV alums stay connected through that, through virtual means, through a lot of YAV stay, connected through boards, through things like that. So the YAV alum community is really active and very broad. Also, the YAV program does something really special, which is at the end of the year, they do a transitions retreat, it's called, a couple months after the YAV year ends. So like October, November, they invite, it has been physically in person, this last year it wasn't, all the YAVs to come back together at a retreat center and just process their year. So they get to see the YAVs that they served with, as well as those who served across the globe, and reflect on it after a little bit of time has passed and they're now in a new chapter. But what does the last YAV chapter have to say to that? And honestly, I mean, what a gift. I will say, as a YAV, I actually stayed a couple months past the year. So I got to meet the next YAV year as well. And I did that because I work for an organization in a conference planning office, and our conference was in December. So I stayed till December. And yes, the YAV program invited me to go to the transition retreat the next year. Yeah, so just real generosity of spirit and people helping people stay connected and process.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Are there other denominational programs similar to this one that the PCUSA provides? Like
Yeah, there are. So Jesuit Volunteer Corps is probably the most well-known. There's
Right.
also an Episcopal one,
Okay.
Lutheran. Actually, when I was a YAV, we served with the Lutherans. We had the same site coordinator and everything. Yeah, so there are a number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about the mission trips of the Latter-day Saints, Emily?
Yeah, theirs is structured
2 years.
very uniquely. Yeah, it's 2
2 years and you get to go to Tonga.
Right. Their mission requirements are much more specific. I was thinking in terms of sort of ecumenical
I know
partners.
you were. Just thought I'd add it.
Right,
We've had,
right.
There is a network of different volunteer programs who are in DC. And so sometimes we tap into that, as well as like AmeriCorps and other programs. City Year. We haven't had a strong relationship with City Year, but we had a placement supervisor who was a City Year alum. And so she kind of brought that energy as well.
Yeah.
Blair, why does Louisville get the first cut at this? I would think you're much better at doing this right at the grassroots level. Why would you send it to a centralized bureaucracy that probably, and I can't imagine, can you tell us on what basis they make this quote initial cut? I would think everybody. Bring 'em
Yeah,
in.
so while I don't know the numbers, it seems to me to be a high percentage that continue on. Louisville does it, I think, honestly, to support us, to do just the first initial round, so that we don't have to make that initial hard decision. Then we can make the more interesting decisions of, okay, so someone's really into this program. We know that. We know they're motivated. And now we can dream with them about what's next. Our colleagues in Louisville, so there are 4 people in the office in Louisville who work with YAV program. They are great. A high percentage of them are YAV alums. And the folks who aren't YAV alums have been in this for a long time. So we have a really good relationship with them. We trust them in this process. And they're pretty dynamic and very transparent. That's also something that we value and keep coming back to. Where's the transparency? Where's the transparency between sites in Louisville? And they respond really well to that, in my experience. So it is a good relationship, and it does seem to work for that just initial, is this person really interested in this program kind of question. Yeah, Julie.
I was going to just ask if you could do a minute or two on the very small virtual program that took place
Thank
for the
you so much,
accepted members that couldn't get to participate this year.
I can't believe I left that off. I'm so glad you brought that up. So there actually has been a virtual offering this year. I was so focused on DC and like whether we had physical people here. But the YAV program has offered a virtual this year with weekly conversations about lots of different justice topics. So site coordinators have led some of that. I've led 2 weeks of that. My first week was on self-care because I have a background in social work. And then my second week was on housing policy because we've done so much housing work in DC. And that has a lot to say to other geographic areas as well. So folks have been participating in that, asking really great questions, continuing just that heart for justice and God's creation through that program. And they've gotten to meet so many different site coordinators, PCUSA, World Mission, personnel. So it's really a way to keep people engaged. Some of those folks are going to be YAVs in the upcoming year, which is awesome. So they've already got this really rich groundwork of personal thought that they put into it. And some folk, actually, there was one gal who was a DC alum who was engaged in the virtual year because she wanted to re-engage with the justice issues that we were talking about. So it's been a really neat program.
And that was nationwide, right? That the virtual year was all nationwide.
Yeah. And
applicants.
I don't know if we had anybody international, but definitely, yes, who are interested in international placements as well, engaged in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there any effort to achieve any kind of male-female ratio, or is any focus on that at all?
You know, that's interesting. It's the history of the program has been very female. From when I was there to now, we just have a lot more women in the program than men. I don't know the reason for that. The focus really has been more on racial equity in the program. We noticed that because of the history of the program, because of where we've recruited, who knows about the program, it's been a lot of white churches. So we're definitely, that's one of the directions we're really trying to expand. And then the equity issues I mentioned around fundraising, things like that, we know we're excluding people because of those.
Great. Well, Blair, thank you so much for joining us today. What an important thing, that an important body of work, and so inspiring that young people want to dedicate a year of their lives to living simply and helping others in their community and growing in their Christian faith. So I know I learned a lot today from your presentation. And I want to remind everyone that next week we will be learning from Dr. Carla Works from the Wesley Theological Seminary on lessons from First Church Corinth.